evening. I am Abhishek Vemuri, co-chair of the National Fair Series Planning Committee and the University Committee on Lectures. And it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Farhad Manjoo. Mr. Manjoo is a technology columnist for Slate magazine. He also co-hosts Slate's podcast, Manners for the Digital Age, a 21st century advice column of sorts, where he responds to questions like, should I correct blatantly wrong info on my friend's post to Facebook? And what to do when you're trapped next to someone whose music is bleeding out from their earbuds? These are very pertinent questions. Mr. Manjoo is a graduate of Cornell University, where he was editor-in-chief of the student newspaper. He is also author of True Enough, Learning to Live in a Post-Fact Society. He also contributes regularly to National Public Radio, Wired News, and Fast Company. It was for Fast Company that he recently wrote, The Great Tech War of 2012, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon Battle for the Future of the Innovation Economy. And also, how fortuitous is it that he is with us on the day Apple introduced the iPad? Would you please all join me in welcoming Farhad Manjoo?
So, a few weeks ago, I received a really lovely invitation from Pat Miller, director of the Lectures program, to come to Ames to talk about the tech industry. And I love talking about this stuff, and I've never been to Ames before. So I checked my calendar, and I saw that it seemed pretty free this week. So I eagerly accepted and, arranged to travel here from my home near San Francisco. And then last week, Apple sent out invitations to the tech press for a special event to be held in San Francisco on March 7th. So I missed today's event. I hear they released something. They're calling it just the iPad, which is weird because it didn't fall. Everyone was thinking it'd be called the iPad 3. But Apple likes to surprise. So I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about how these events go, these Apple events. So for technology journalists, Apple events are kind of like the Super Bowl, I imagine, for sports reporters, or maybe like the Iowa caucuses are for political reporters. They're not only the biggest things we cover and the things that most of our audience cares about, they're also the least predictable. We usually have some vague idea of what's going to happen before they occur, but usually you have to prepare yourself for something completely unexpected. Usually what happens is we know they're going to release something big or small, they're going to release some kind of phone or some kind of tablet, but there's always little details that are confounding. And that ends up to be the thing most of us care about and write about. The events, they happen 3 or 4 times a year, and they always begin with an email. The company sends out invitations to this ever-shifting group of VIPs and journalists. I usually receive one. Sometimes I don't. And then I email them and say, did you forget my email address? And sometimes they say, oh, yes, we have the wrong email address for you. And sometimes they say, a couple times they said, no, you're not invited. So that's always sad. But, I've been covering technology. I've been sort of a professional technology journalist since 2000 when I started working for Wired. And I've been to almost every Apple event since then. And it's remarkably consistent how the entire choreography occurs. So the email arrives. It's always 1 week beforehand. It always has a succinct subject line like, "Please join Apple for a special event." Nothing special there. And then there's always some kind of cryptic note on the email. There's a picture of some device, and then for the iPod ones, it was something like "Let's Rock," so you knew that it was going to be a music thing. And usually there's always speculation beforehand, too. Weeks and months before the invitations go out, we before the iPad was released 2 years ago, but there was rumors about it. There were rumors about it from 2002. So, their entire blogs devoted to covering and analyzing all the leaks that come from the supply chain, which is the network of manufacturers and assemblers who put together all of Apple's products. And then, sometimes someone will get an actual device. So in 2010, Gizmodo, the tech blog, bought an iPhone that was left in a bar in the Bay Area. This year we saw pieces of the new iPad on some blogs that got them from various parts of the supply chain. And sometimes, what's the craziest part is sometimes Apple itself will leak to the press to throw people off. So just before the launch 2 years ago of the original iPad, well, it's a leak to the press when it appears in the Wall Street Journal. That's their sort of preferred publication to leak to. And so they 2 years ago, before the iPad came out, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal about a week or two beforehand confirming basically that Apple was going to release a tablet computer. And if you looked at the story after the announcement, you would see that most of the details were correct, except for one thing. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing people familiar with the matter, that the new iPad was going to cost between $600, well, they didn't know the name, the new Apple tablet was going to cost between $600 and $800, some high amount. And, people, when they read that, they were bummed out about it. It kind of lowered expectations, because people were preparing for an Apple tablet, but an $800 Apple tablet seemed maybe not that great. And that's kind of what Apple wanted. They were preparing us to expect something not so great, and then when Steve Jobs said that it was going to be $500, everyone was happier about that. They think about all this stuff beforehand. So the way the events are, they used to be at Apple's, they used to be in big venues at Macworld. Now they're usually in very small venues in San Francisco or at the headquarters. And they're small rooms, a few hundred people. You go in there. It always looks the same. It's always dark. It's kind of elegant. There's always music playing, usually Bob Dylan or the Beatles, which is Steve Jobs' favorites. And then at the appointed hour, you can never be late because they always start at 10 a.m. The lights dim, the music stops, and the music never stops in the middle of a song. They have to make sure the song ends, and then they stop the music. And then, until last year, there was Steve Jobs. He would kind of jog up the stage, and he would wear, we know what he wore, T-shirt, black mock turtleneck, and jeans. And he'd always begin with a thank you, and he was always surprisingly soft-spoken, and it was very casual. I think there's a sense that in order to be releasing such a big product, that the event has to be bombastic in some sense, and larger than life. But I think that was what was so exciting about seeing a Steve Jobs presentation, is that it was always exactly the opposite of that. He talked slowly, very casually, and in sort of a friendly way, like he was telling a friend about this new gadget. And it was just like, you try to be a reporter and try to be objective about these events. But I had the experience several times of, I cover technology because I like technology, and I'm really excited about devices and gadgets and things in general. And so I had the experience several times of seeing one of these Steve Jobs keynotes and having to force myself not to go to the Apple store, which is right nearby, and buy the item. like right afterward. And it wasn't just the way that Steve Jobs announced these that was so irresistible. What was also kind of mesmerizing was the exacting detail of the product announcements. It wasn't just what he was saying, but what was going on behind the scenes. So one example that still amazes me is, so usually they're in San Francisco, these events are in San Francisco, and there are bus stops all around the city and all around the event. And then the bus stops have posters, advertising. Somehow, during the event, Apple people, managed to change all of the posters on the bus stops to reflect whatever product is being announced at the event. So you have the experience of entering the press event, not knowing what the product is. It's a big surprise. And you leave, and then there's all these ads for it all around you. And not only are there ads, but like, for example, someone noticed that on the iPad, when the iPad was released, the pictures of the iPad on the posters, on all the advertising, said 9:41 a.m. That was the clock time. So, people wondered why it was 9:41 a.m. Well, it turns out that's the exact time that it was announced. And so they made sure that the clock on the device, on the ad, had the time that it was announced. Just sort of all of these details that most of their competitors don't think about. And so that gives you an idea of what I missed to be here today. I don't feel too bad about it because, this year's event wasn't going to be a big surprise. We all knew that Apple would be releasing a new iPad today. And it's pretty clear that whatever device Apple was going to release today was going to be a huge device, that it was going to sell tens or hundreds of millions of units sometime this year. And everyone who's watching this new market, this new tablet market, agrees that Apple will remain like the undisputed king of the tablet business for the foreseeable future. Right now they have something like 60% of the market. If you're generous, and probably more. They have a much higher percent of the actual revenues in the tablet market. And it's hard to see how they could, lose a majority share anytime soon. So, but I'm not here to talk about this iPad, the one that was released today, but instead about kind of what the iPad and devices like it represent. And what these devices, what a device like the iPad and like smartphones, what they mean for the technology industry, and more importantly for all of us who use these devices and who can't get them out of our lives. So the iPad, along with the Android phone, the iPhone, tablets of all kinds, these are being called in the technology industry post-PC devices. So, you get a sense of how big they are by that label. You may not, I assume lots of people here have smartphones, probably not everyone, but the belief is that one day, everyone in a room like this will have not only a phone, not only a smartphone, but a tablet computer that is, each of your own machine. We'll still use PCs, desktops, and laptops, but I think that many companies in the technology industry believe that we'll use those in a more limited fashion. We'll be using our mobile devices more often. They'll fill a greater part of our day, and we'll be using them for more kinds of more activities and more varied kinds of activities. So you'll use your laptop or desktop for what we normally think of today as work. But for everything else, for every kind of non-work thing you do, and probably for even some work, you'll be using your other kind of machine. So and you'll have more of them. You'll have not kind of one computer, but several of them in different sizes that you'd use for different purposes. And so that's sort of the first big insight, I think, that's important to recognize about the technology industry today in this, what is often called this period of transition. We're moving from stationary machines to mobile machines that are going to be everywhere and that we're going to use multiple units of. So there's that. And the second insight that I want to talk about tonight is related to the first. It's about what we'll do with those machines. And I think that people in the tech industry have this one idea, which is that we'll consume stuff. We'll consume media of all kinds, music, movies, TV shows. And we'll also consume physical goods. We'll use these devices as kind of a gateway to our shopping for physical goods through the internet, but also in real life, in stores. We'll use these devices to interact with the shops we're in, or to tell us what to buy, or to give us discounts. You can see this. This is the whole strategy of the Amazon Kindle Fire. So this is a device that Amazon released last year, and by all accounts, it costs Amazon about $210 to make one of these, and it's selling them for $199. So why would anybody sell a device for $10 less than it cost them to make it? So, like the old joke, they hope to make it up on volume. Like, they want you to get this device, and when you get this device, you're locked into Amazon's. You're not locked in, but you're pretty much locked into Amazon's store. And all the media you consume on it, the books, movies, magazines, and all that comes from Amazon. But it's not just the media, it's also everything else. The Kindle Fire comes with a month subscription to Amazon Prime, which is this amazing revenue generator for Amazon. This is a $79 subscription program that allows you to get expedited shipping. And the $79 is just meaningless for Amazon. The real thing they care about is that after you pay that $79, they notice that it changes the way people behave. It changes the way people think about shopping. So in the past, before you have that system, you think about there's some sort of there's kind of a psychological hurdle you face before you buy something from Amazon. People buy things from online when they can't find it offline, or when they think it's sort of high value enough that they're going to make the free shipping barrier, or they're going to, threshold, and or some other reason. They don't think about it as the first place to shop. But once they've paid the $79, they sort of are in the club, and then they think of Amazon as like the only place to buy stuff, and they'll buy everything from there. I speak from personal experience. Like I know the UPS guy very well, because I get, the first time I think of an item that I need, like something that I would previously have purchased at the supermarket, but because I think about it right when I'm at home, I can just buy it on Amazon right then. So the Kindle Fire comes with a month subscription to Amazon Prime, and they hope that you'll stay longer than a month, and that you'll look at your your Kindle Fire as the place to buy everything, as the kind of the device that'll allow you to buy pet food and lawnmowers and whatever else you want. So that's the second part, that you'll use these devices to buy stuff, and these companies that are providing these devices will get a cut of what you buy. And there's one more thing to consider about these post-PC machines and how they change economic life. The last thing is data. So all of these post-PC machines are intimately connected to individual users. But that's a major difference between, compared to how we use computers today. You may have like a family desktop computer at home, but nobody has like a family Kindle. Like everyone, like I know people who try to share a Kindle and it doesn't work out. Like you want your own books, it's tied to a single account, and it's cheap enough that you can buy two. So people end up buying two. And that's good for the companies that are trying to provide these to us. Because the more that they can identify patterns on one machine with the desires of one person, the better they can do everything else. I mean, the tech industry depends on all of this data in the same way that your laptop depends on its battery. Like the data is the fuel for everything else the tech industry does. It powers the advertising for companies like Google and Facebook, who depend entirely on advertising for their revenues. And data is the source of all kinds of recommendation systems for Amazon. And Apple uses data to improve its products in various ways and to decide how to show you stuff in the App Store and the iTunes Store. It's just these are companies that kind of look at data as, in many cases, they are a competitive advantage over companies in other industries. And data also powers new products. So Google's voice recognition system, which is available on Android phones, is created entirely by data that they first got from a service. They started up a free phone information service called Goog 411 that they released many, many years ago. And so you would call up the service, and it was free. You could get free 411 service anywhere you wanted, anywhere you were, and you would say something to the computer. The computer would record your voice, and they could tell if they used some rudimentary algorithms to try to decide what you were saying, and they could, over time, they recorded millions of voice samples and could create from that a better and better and better voice recognition algorithm. So now it's really good. Now Android voice recognition can, determine what you're saying uncannily well, and that's what also is the secret behind the Apple Siri system. Google uses all data, crowdsourced data from Android phones to show you traffic maps, traffic density on its maps. Spell checker on its website, on the Google website, is based on all this data. So I don't want to suggest that it's only sort of nefarious things that the data is being used for. They are actually using it for products that you probably like. So these three ideas, these new mobile devices, the consumption of digital and physical goods through those devices, and then the analysis of the data about that consumption, all of these three things sort of feed into one another continuously in a virtuous loop for these companies. And so my goal tonight is to convince you that there are just four companies. There are four companies on the planet that are poised to benefit from these trends, these three things. They'll benefit massively and shake up every market in the tech business and probably beyond the tech business. So those four companies in alphabetical order are Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. Just making sure I had the alphabets right there. So why alphabetical order? Because I don't want to give you a sense that I'm in, one camp or the other here. I think they're more or less all kind of equally matched. Of the four right now, Apple definitely has the best financial picture by far, but I think they all have sort of equal strengths and sort of equal disadvantages. So I think I argue that over the next few years, we'll see these four companies jockey for space in a host of different markets. Obvious ones like the mobile phone and tablets and apps and social networking, but less obvious ones too, like the publishing industry and the advertising industry, and the future of television. These companies will be, even if they say they're not trying to do so, they're going to become major players in all of those other industries also. And this is new. Not long ago, you could sum up each of these companies like very neatly with one sentence for each of them. Apple made consumer electronics. Well, actually, you could just say Apple made computers. Google ran a search engine. Amazon was a web store. And Facebook was nothing a few years ago, and it was just a social network until recently. And, to this day, you can go to Google's site and look up its mission statement, and you'll find that it says on like the third or fourth principle, they say it's best to do one thing really, really well. That's the way Google saw itself when it was founded in 1998. And now it just seems like a lie that they would say that. Because when they said one thing really, really well, what they were talking about was the search engine. But now Google would like you to believe that it does many things really, really well. They think that they're doing social networking really, really well with Google+. They think that they're making a really good browser with Chrome. They make the most popular smartphone platform in the world now with Android. So, you could say that they're doing all of those things, with the exception of Google+, all of those things really well. But the other companies are no different. Like the other companies just haven't said that they only do one thing. But, Apple is a phone company, a tablet company, a music company, a movie and TV company. It now is running advertising, so it's an advertising company. And then, it dabbles in making computers also. It's the world's most valuable company now. And, it looks like in the next few years it could be produce revenues that are historic, would be completely unprecedented in the history of commerce. Apple's stock 4 years ago was very low, like $100 or so. Its stock price now is $500, and there are stock analysts who say that in the next 3 years, Apple stock will be $1,000 a share. And the reason is that they have this huge market ahead of them. They have sort of the most profitable products in two markets, phones and tablets, that are the fastest growing markets in the tech business. So, and the other thing is that they have they've perfected something that seems really difficult. Of course they make great products, and they make products that people want, which is important. But the real genius, over the last 5 years, is they've been able to make mass market luxury goods, which means devices that feel like they should be expensive, and that some people claim are expensive. But then when you compare them to every other gadget in their class, are either the same or less. They cost consumers either the same or less. So that's true of the iPhone. And the iPad, for example, is not, just the best tablet computer you can buy. It's also the least, one of the least expensive tablets you can buy. And so the only way that rivals have been able to match the price is by selling at a loss. But what's amazing is that Apple can sell at these prices and make a huge profit. So it can sell at prices that if its rivals try to match, bankrupts them. That's what, when HP tried to release a tablet last year, it didn't sell at its original price, and the only way they could sell it was by selling it at $199. So, this is the trick that Tim Cook, who's the new CEO of Apple, came up with. They were able to kind of master this global production cycle in a way that many people still can't figure out how they do it. They have used their cash to buy up, all of the world's supply, first of flash memory chips, and then more recently a huge portion of the world's supply of tablet-sized touchscreen panels. And that just raises the cost for everyone else, and it makes prices much cheaper for Apple, so they can, continue to make a profit. And because they have $100 billion in cash, they can just sort of continue this for a long time. Some of this now is sort of coming back to haunt Apple in the form of lots of stories about the worker conditions at their plants. And, defenders of Apple say that it's kind of unfair to pick on Apple because the same contractors that are making devices for Apple are making devices for most of Apple's rivals. So that's true. And so, you could say, Apple is just no worse than everyone else. The trouble is for Apple's brand, their brand is about being better. That's sort of their whole ethos. And I suspect they consider these stories and this idea kind of serious enough that they're going to do something over the next few years to kind of radically change how they're perceived. I don't know if they're going to do anything that's beyond changing how they're perceived, because I don't know if they can kind of actually change the conditions at their plants without changing their cost structure. But I think they're going to try. And then next there's Facebook, which is just going public, and it's the smallest of these four companies. Apple takes about a week to make what Facebook made all of last year, so it's tiny compared to these other companies. But Facebook is going to go public with a valuation on the stock market of $100 billion, which means that to justify that stock price in 10 years' time, it will need to be making $70 billion a year in revenues, which is bigger than Google is now. It's twice the size of Google is now. So it's going to have to grow 25 to 30%, and it's probably going to have to get all of that money from advertising. So because the other way that it could grow by getting a lot more people to use the site is they're running out of people. There's going to be 1 billion people on Facebook soon, and there just aren't that many people in the world left who have access to the internet, who have access to devices that can access Facebook. So, with they're kind of saturating the market, and they're just going to, in order to make that kind of money, what you're going to notice on Facebook that they do to justify their stock price is try to use all of the data that they're collecting from your interacting with the site in various profitable ways. So, and it's incredibly valuable data that Facebook is getting from all of us. They sit between kind of every kind of human communication now, in kind of sharing news stories, sharing photos, simple, and doing all kinds of new things that we didn't do in the past, like playing social games. Like, they get data from all of the stuff that occurs on their site, and even stuff that occurs on other sites that are connected to Facebook. So, like, you read a story on the New York Times site, and you click like on Facebook, Facebook gets that data. Or you see a product on Amazon, and you click like, Facebook gets that data. So Mark Zuckerberg is creating this huge database of like human desire, like what people want. And the question now is what Facebook is going to do with that. So it's kind of, there's some obvious things it could do with that. They're going to probably set up some kind of internet-wide advertising network that runs ads on various different sites based on your Facebook likes. And they're probably going to just run a lot more ads on Facebook itself. So, you'll see more and more ads that are recommended by your friends, ads that are generated by your activity on Facebook or elsewhere. And then you'll see Facebook sort of spread out into various different kinds of gadgets that we haven't seen it on so far. So far it's not running ads on mobile devices, but probably soon Facebook will have to start running ads on phones. And it's not inconceivable, and it's likely that over time Facebook will need to sort of come up with some way to create its own mobile phones. The company has denied this often, but there are many leaks from many people who used to work there and who do work there who say that it's looked into this project, and it seems obvious why Facebook would want to create its own mobile platform of some kind, because right now it's at the mercy of all of its rivals. Like, the only way it can get to you on a mobile device is through Apple or through Google, and that's not good for Facebook. It lives in fear of that Google would somehow prioritize Google Plus on your Android phone, or that Apple will just decide one day to disallow Facebook from collecting data about you, or using its Facebook credits program or some other thing, because Apple is known to be kind of capricious about its phones and its policies, that Apple will do something that will reduce the revenues that Facebook can get. So as Facebook is growing, Google is kind of wondering what to do about Facebook. So in some ways, Facebook is the biggest threat that Google has kind of ever faced, because Google makes all of its money from advertising, and if more and more people kind of see Facebook as like the front page for their web experience, if they spend more time on Facebook, and if they kind of give Facebook more of their data rather than using the web on Google network sites where Google gets your data, that's really bad for Google and for their advertising. And so, Google Plus hasn't done well recently. Google says it's doing well, but no one believes them. But sort of they have bigger plans for Google Plus than to be just kind of like a place that you go to. They want it to be kind of a social network that, as long as you're kind of logged into Google, your Google account in some way, so that account will just sort of collect information about you wherever you are on the web. This is sort of the motivation behind their recent change in their privacy policy, where they now say that anything you do on one Google site is covered by the same privacy policy as every other one, and that any sort of data you give to one Google site can be used by another Google site. So you write something in an email on Gmail. In the past, the only sort of place you would be shown an ad based on that email message has been in Gmail itself. But now it's possible that you'd write an email about your upcoming trip somewhere, and then as you're searching the web, you might see an ad about that trip, or as you're watching a video, you might see a video ad about, an airline or something like that. So this is their goal, to use Google Plus as kind of a repository of information about you. When you sign up to Google Plus, you can tell it who your friends are, you can tell it your other social networking accounts, and so you don't really need to use Google Plus for it to be useful for Google. They just need that information, that sign up, and they've had lots of sign-ups. And then finally, there's Amazon. So, if you look at Amazon, it's hard to. The first question that springs to mind is what's Amazon's purpose? What are they trying to do? They used to just sell stuff. And they sell stuff that other people make, and now they're selling stuff that they make for themselves, and they're also doing some weird technical things like leasing out server space. So they used to have kind of small goals. They just wanted to be the biggest retailer of any kind. They wanted to be kind of the next Walmart. But now it seems like that's sort of not their final goal. That's just sort of something along the way. All of Amazon's actions suggest they're bent on capturing more and more sales from not just becoming the biggest web store in the world, but becoming kind of the biggest retailer of any kind, capturing more and more sales from the offline world. Not long ago, at the end of last year, they launched this pretty brazen promotion where they offered people money to go into local stores and use the Amazon phone price check app to look up prices on anything at your local hardware store, or it wasn't in bookstores but in other places. And then if you looked it up and you decided to purchase that item from Amazon while you were in the store, in one of their rival stores, they would give you a $5 discount. So they earned a lot of criticism for this. It was kind of obvious. It seemed like kind of obvious that they were trying to kill local businesses. But I think that suggests the kind of competition they have in mind. They believe that shopping can be redefined by the web, and they're going to be the ones to do it, and they're going to kind of stop at nothing to make sure that they can get you as a customer. But they're not just a shopping company. I think that in some ways you could say that Amazon is the most successful competitor so far of Apple in the media and entertainment business. And in the tablet business, they're the ones, they rank second to Apple now. They have a tiny share. It's less than 5% of the tablet market, but it's more than any other rival. And of the four CEOs of these companies, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, I would peg him as being the most like Steve Jobs. He seems to be the most passionate of these four about customer satisfaction and the most capable of looking at a problem in a way that others missed. You see this in two products, in Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud server system that they launched. They did it before any other rival did it. It wasn't something that Amazon was kind of known for, their infrastructure in any way. But now it's become, the main system that all kinds of startups use to store all their data. If you use something like Instagram or Tumblr, all of your data is being stored on Amazon servers, and they charge for it. And I think that Jeff Bezos seems the most temperamentally attuned to creating new big things, the way that Steve Jobs was. One of my favorite quotes of Bezos is at an investors meeting recently. He said, "We're willing to think long term. We start with a customer and work backward, and very importantly, we are willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. So this is something that Wall Street, stock analysts hate this about Amazon. Is like they always have huge revenue but very small profits because they're always using their revenue for new research and development projects that they never really talk about, and they're always shrinking their margins so that they can sell. I mean, they're trying to sell you a device like the Kindle Fire for no money at all. But I think that this misunderstood for long periods of time quote is important because I think that it suggests that Jeff Bezos is, he understands how the technology business works, which is that sometimes it's inevitable that when you create new technologies, people don't really understand them at first or don't really understand their full implications. When the Kindle e-reader came out, many people's instant reaction was that it was ugly, expensive, and would only be purchased by, a small number of people who just liked books. What people didn't foresee was Amazon's determination to keep at it, to just keep every year releasing a new version and making it cheaper and making it better and making more books available for it. I once wrote that Jeff Bezos was the crazy Eddie of the tech industry. He was on TV. You expected him to go on TV and like wear a cowboy hat and say like, "We will not be undersold," because he's just always lowering the price, like to a crazy extent. Like the Kindle, every time Barnes & Noble, which was trying to compete with Amazon, every time they lowered the price of the Kindle, Jeff Bezos lowered it more. And so now you can get, when it came out, it was $400, and now you can get one for $79. And each time he's lowered it, they've seen more sales, and more sales of the Kindle means more sales of Kindle books, which gives Amazon this real central power now in the publishing industry. And now they sort of control a huge part of the industry and can determine, pricing and can determine what books get published. They now have a self-publishing program that's getting increasingly popular. And, so it's been this phenomenon in the publishing world. And I don't think that it's something that people could foresee at first. So that's the sketch of these four companies and what they're trying to do. And what I'm saying is that each of them has specific goals that run at odds with one another. They've all got to do something that kind of ticks off one of their rivals and that upturns entire other industries. Facebook can't survive without grabbing a huge share of the ad business, which hurts Google. Google's profits margins can't survive without it developing some way to fight back at Facebook. Amazon can't survive without ensuring access to its customers, and so that means making a storefront on tablets. And Apple can't continue to keep its huge profit margins if every one of its rivals is sort of coming at it with all kinds of new products and devices. So that's kind of the war between them. And the battleground is all of us. It's you. They're fighting over you, and they're fighting over your data. And in some ways, this is good because of this fight, you're getting more innovation. You're getting better devices with more features that can make your life better at lower prices and sometimes even for free. So because of this fight over the next few years, we'll get really great new consumer products, most likely. Let's take TV as the kind of the main example of something that people expect will be radically changed over the next few years because of these four companies. The TV today is a big hassle. It's kind of like it's a black hole for these companies because over the last few years, they've all released products or various kinds of software to try to make TV better. And, over time, lots of tech companies have tried to release products for the living room. But nothing makes TV kind of, like TVs remain sort of constant. It's constant and like a bad technology experience. We all have kind of lots of different devices in the living room. The TV, the cable box, DVD player, and probably like some kind of video game system. And the problem is they don't talk to one another very well. So you have like lots of remotes that control single devices, and then you can get universal remotes, but in my experience, they haven't really perfected those. So it's a big mess, and it seems ripe for someone coming to change it. Now, for years, Apple has been working on its answer to this problem. It's released this small device called the Apple TV for a few years now, and it's been getting better and better, and it's a handy thing. It lets you watch Apple content on your TV. But Apple is also working on an actual television, a big screen that will replace your current TV in some way. No one knows what it's like or what it'll do or how they'll market a TV that's different. The TV market is very difficult. It has very low profit margins, and prices always fall. And it seems like a market that Apple is not like a market that's not made for the economics that Apple expects. But we'll see what happens. What I expect, though, is that if they do release a device, a TV, the thing that it'll do is kind of make everything drop dead simple. So the Apple answer to television would probably be, it would just be the Apple TV. Like they would try to do away with all those extra devices and all those remotes, and it would just be one single-purpose device, and you wouldn't have to hassle with cables and set inputs or anything like that. It would just all work. And it would all work through software in the web. It would have an operating system like your phone does, and you would choose what to do on it like you do on your phone with apps. And that's how you would add extra functionality, not by adding devices to it, not by hooking things up. And all of the other three, have similar cards to play in the TV space. They don't only want to make it easier to use, they also want to give you more choice in what you watch. So you would be able to choose what's on, not only what's on TV at that particular moment, but or what you have on your DVR, but they're also trying to make it easier for you to get stuff from all over, from the internet, or from various subscription services. And they also want to, the thing that you notice when each of these companies enters a market is that they try to reduce kind of the incumbent inefficiencies that are there. So that when they go in the publishing market, they want to reduce the prices of the content and take a slice of it, to sell a lot more and to just get a cut of it. And that's probably sort of their aim in the TV business, is that, we now pay a lot for TV through cable subscription services, but don't get kind of much choice or flexibility in the menu. And they would want to sell, the tech companies would want to sell things in media in a more ad hoc basis, try to directly go at the business model of the cable companies. So in some ways this seems pretty good. Like you'd pay less than your current system, you'd get more choice, and the other thing is that it would likely be more interactive. Like if Facebook enters TV, you would expect that there would be a social dimension to television. So, you would be watching TV by yourself, but that your TV would be able to tell you that your friends are watching this show, and you'd be able to kind of join in your friends watching a show while they're watching it, and then you'd be able to somehow communicate with one another while you're watching the show. So you're all in different homes, on different devices, but watching the same thing at the same time. So you could say that some of this is pretty good. It sounds like a great thing. If you want to have cheaper content, if you want to have if you don't want to deal with your cable company, if you don't mind chatting with your friends while you're watching TV. But then there's all these other problems. I mean, you could say, the first thing that people think about when they think about adding a social layer to new devices is they think about privacy. So what will these companies be able to find out about you while you're watching TV? While you're talking to your friends while you're watching TV? And what will they do with that knowledge that, you spend this many hours a week watching TV, and this is what you watch, and here's what you're doing on your other devices while you're watching. This could be a goldmine for them, and you may not like it. And then there's also questions beyond privacy, like questions about how this affects culture. Like, how will social TV change the kinds of shows that get made and change the kinds of shows that find an audience? And how will it change the business model of the networks and the other artists, the artists who produce the shows? Will there be a market for serious shows or investigative news, or will it change the market in some way? These sound like they may be irrelevant questions to just the kind of the big story of Apple coming up with a TV or Facebook entering the TV business, but they're really unavoidable questions about like how these companies might change industries and institutions that we're used to. It happened in journalism where like nobody thought, very few people thought when the web came about that it would affect how newspapers operate. But very quickly it started to affect how newspapers operate, and now people wonder if there's a future for newspapers. And you could have those same kinds of, the same kind of scenario happen in television or any other market where these companies operate. And so I think that's the main thing about these companies to think about is that everything they do will change your life in some way. They're going to change entire industries in profound ways over the next few years. And the thing that I want to sort of stress more than anything, if you leave with one insight, it's that it's a sense of inevitability about these companies. Like, there's no getting around the massive change in how you purchase and consume information and goods that they're going to try to produce. And, if you run a business, if you work for a business, which is basically everyone, if you're looking to have a place in the economy, studying these four giants might be kind of the best education you can get into what's going to happen in tomorrow's economy. So I guess I'll end with there. Pay attention to what they're doing, because they're not standing still, and everyone should try to keep up. Thanks. And I'll be happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Yes, I was wondering, you mentioned these companies specifically. What are your thoughts on Microsoft? I understand that there was a recent fallout in a patent battle with Google. Are they also trying to get in on this?
I consider Microsoft interesting extra player. They were like, 15 years ago, they were like unavoidable in the tech industry, and now, because the industry is moving away from the devices that they make most of their money on, there's a real question about whether they can continue. They're extremely profitable right now, but the places where they make money are kind of dying out. I've seen, and for a while it seemed like they weren't taking this threat seriously. Like, they hadn't done anything on phones that was interesting, and it seemed like they thought that the tablet PC market was kind of a joke. But they've done two things recently that I think, there are three things that are really fascinating. So one, Xbox is becoming something that's more than a game system, and it's becoming kind of their catch-all media system. And it's very successful, and they could make a lot of money from that. And it could be their answer to something like an Apple TV device. Two, and these are kind of related, is that they have a really, I love the Windows Phone. Like if you haven't tried the new Windows Phone operating system, I urge you to try it before you buy your next phone, because it works really well. It's much more stylish. It looks better than the iPhone, and I'm talking about the interface. It looks better than the iPhone or Android, and in many ways it's easier to use. The problem is that the hardware itself, so far, the actual physical phones, haven't been very appealing. They have a partnership with Nokia that may give us sort of better phones sometime this year. And a related thing is the new Windows 8, which I've been using recently, is really good. Could be a good tablet operating system. Again, it depends on the kinds of hardware that other companies make. So I think it's a big question mark. Like, they could do well, but at this point it seems like it's unclear.
You mentioned that Facebook is going to be needing to get into other mediums other than just their current. Haven't they already tried that with the HTC status?
Yeah, I think they thought that wasn't kind of the true Facebook phone experience, and it was something that sort of, they didn't consider it kind of a real thing, and I don't think it did well. And I think that if they, it's kind of like, so before the iPhone came out, Apple partnered with, who was it? I forget. But they had kind of an an iTunes phone, and it was terrible. And I think that's what they thought the status. That's how you can think of the status. Like, I think that the real Facebook phone would be better. Motorola, I think it was a Motorola phone. Yeah.
Good evening.
Hi.
I got to thinking when you just said a little bit ago that Microsoft 15 years ago would have been this monolith that you could never see past within the tech industry. Do you think there will be another wave of companies after this Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple quartet that you're talking about? Or do you think things might fragment a little bit more than that?
The reason that I like writing about technology is that it's very difficult to predict. So it seems now that these four companies are really difficult to beat. They all have, huge advantages, barriers to entry in their markets, and it seems like they're just fighting one another. But you could have said that 10 years ago about someone like Yahoo, and no one thinks about Yahoo anymore. Or 7 years ago about MySpace, people thought that. So it's hard to know. I would say that I think there's a not small chance that these four companies, or one of them, could be defeated by a company we haven't heard of that's sort of being cooked up right now in the next 5 years. I would say that it's plausible, and it may even be likely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will go ahead and do it for our Q&A. Would you please all join me again in thanking Mr. Manju?
Thank you.